I will call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. First item on the agenda is the approval of the regular meeting minutes from March 25th, 2025. I don't know if you guys had any comments on those meeting minutes.
I move we approve the March 25th meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, great. All right. All in favor, Al?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And Doug is aye. All right. We will take up the executive session meeting minutes in executive session. So I will skip that for now. Next item is just, I think this is really just kind of a recap. Unfortunately, I was out, I missed town meeting, but obviously the warrant article, I believe, is passed. So I just had this as an agenda item. I don't know if you guys want to talk about it or any kind of recap or anything. Not that we need to spend too much time on it, but
I thought that Paul and Ellen did an excellent job of presenting. Clearly, there were no serious objections. I did contact the treasurer today, and the total sum available to us now is $998,000 plus a little. I think it's plus. It's so close to $1 million, we might as well call it that. But we actually have to put it to work sooner rather than later.
agreed.
Right.
And so, Al, so is that now it's been transferred to as well? So it's actually in the account, or is there still a process?
They're still, it's basically waiting for Carla to return from vacation. But
Okay.
the money is available to us that we don't have to wait until the 1st of July.
Okay.
So it was transferred from existing funds.
Okay. Okay. All right, great. And nothing else on that topic. So the next item is the housing production plan and the proposals received. Maybe we punt on this until Ellen can join, just given that she's been a key part of this. If that makes sense, and we can drop down to other items. I might take an item out of order, but the first was a discussion of potential joint open space committee and affordable housing trust meeting. I had talked to Freddie Gillespie, I believe.
Gillespie, yes.
Yep, Gillespie. Yep. And Paul, I think we may remember this even from Shopsy days, right? Again, given the 61A potential land parcels that might pop up, there could be some synergies with the open space committee, thinking about, kind of a joint purchase that is for open space and kind of affordable housing. So
Yep.
I think it'd be great to have a joint meeting, but I'll leave it to you guys to hear what everyone collectively thinks, but something we can schedule in the future. It's not like a right now type thing. It'd probably be in a couple meetings, but just, was curious people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. In fact, this may come up later in this meeting with one of the parcels that we'll be talking about, which struck me as something where we might want to combine with open space. So, I don't know if just having the meeting with them with no project in mind, how fruitful that's going to be. But if we have something in mind, then definitely that would be the way to go.
Yeah, I think my understanding is there's little or no money available in the open space bucket of the CPA. And I no problem with meeting with them, but I think having something concrete to discuss would be useful. Otherwise, we just kind of talk about theoretical things. I think the reality is that I don't think the town has a tremendous desire to acquire more open space at this point, given that we have a lot, but that would easily be wrong. I think we've got a lot of other fish to fry at the moment, but there's no harm in talking, but it would be really useful to have something specific to discuss.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So, I think I'm fine with, just wanted to bring it up, and, we can also wait to see when we have something of interest, right? To see if there's some synergies, particularly Al, to your point, I mean, there really is no monies available for open space, definitely don't want this to be AHT funds, purchasing open space for open space, right? I mean, I think we want to use our funds for our purposes, but yeah, so, I mean, yeah, good that we're generally in favor of it. And maybe we'll hold off until we have something a bit more substantive to talk about that might be of interest.
Yeah, I
Good
mean,
evening, Ellen.
just so everybody knows, there is 168-1A parcel on Northborough Road. And I have to recuse myself from that because I have a close relative who abuts that property.
Okay. Ellen, yeah, so you didn't miss much. We just quickly approved the meeting minutes, and we just did a recap of kind of the warrant article. Al just let us know that we do have now a total of $998,000 worth of funds, which is awesome. And then we skipped over the housing production plan, waiting for you to join, and we were just kind of talking about the joint open space committee and AHT meeting in the future. So that's where we are.
Great. Thank you for the recap and apologies for joining late. Our last meeting ran a little late, so.
No worries. And honestly, my sincere apologies to all of you guys for when we were out a couple weeks ago. And I will definitely make sure that we have a joint co-host teed up. And you guys can actually sign in, because obviously there's a different procedure for signing in when you're hosting the meeting. So my apologies on that. So make sure it doesn't happen again on my end. So so I think the next item is honestly the housing production plan and proposals. And I did send those out. And Ellen, thank you for the email reminder. I forgot that they were just coming to me and town officials. So those have been sent out. And so several emails came through. So hopefully you all have received those at this point.
Yeah, thank you for sending.
Yep.
So I will defer to the group how you guys want to approach. I have not been able to dig in through them thoroughly yet, just to be honest. So that's something that is still on my list to do, but I don't know if anyone wants to start discussions around them or how you guys want to approach this.
First, can we I counted just 2 proposals, is that right? One of them came twice, I think, so.
Yes,
There's just
there are
2?
two.
Okay. Well, I mean, I looked at them. Go ahead, Ellen.
No, sorry, I was just gonna say, I just want to make sure we check in on the timeline piece, because the RFQ we sent out, had select board signing off on one of these tomorrow. So obviously we need to have enough of a discussion here and then start that process. So I think, we just want to make sure we're communicating with those who submitted the bids, kind of what our updated kind of review and selection timeline is, once we have a sense of that. And then I think to the substance of them, the prices came in almost identical.
Yeah.
The difference of a few $100s, which I think is nice and lets us make more of a decision on the substance of the quotes. And yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to share their initial thoughts. But I think they're 2 really solid firms who have a lot of experience in this, with kind of slightly different presentation styles. I feel like looking through some of the examples that they sent. So I think a lot of that might come down to, not style, but kind of how we want this information to be packaged and shared and presented.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it was the one from Community Scale. It talked about like having well, first of all, presenting everything in plain English so everybody can understand it, which is nice. And then they talked about having a website to present the findings, which I thought was a good idea. They seem to have less experience than the other. It was the other one. I think it was Barrett. Were they the ones who did the last one for us?
No, so the one who did the last one doesn't do them anymore. But
that's
Barrett
right.
does do a lot of these.
Yeah, they seem to have more experience in this particular aspect, but. And they reference some experience with our town. I don't know what that is, but. I don't know, like you said, they both seem good, but.
Okay. Um. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have the authority to engage these folks directly. We don't actually need the select board's approval on this. Is that? We have the ability, the authority to hire consultants. I don't know whether there was a plan to actually present this to the select board.
Al, it's a good question. I do not know, right? I wasn't involved the last time this went through. Also, I think it was through, Shopsy, but I think actually the trust actually paid for it. So I do not recall I do not know what the procedure was.
I believe it's one of our 16 enumerated authorities. So I think, I don't know that we need to clog up the select board agenda. I will ask the chair if she wants to place it on the agenda. There's a meeting on the 29th, and I believe there's a meeting on the 5th.
Yeah, and I think our kind of thought with the RFQ was that we would kind of do the legwork of reviewing these proposals with the idea that the select board potentially needed to sign off on it. And there would be more, and which might be wrong. But the select board would then be more formally engaged with the presentation of the completed draft plan and the opportunity to review that versus kind of needing to take up a lot of their time in this phase. But if we don't need to do that either, then we can keep this moving forward.
I can certainly ping the chair and town council just confirming that we have the authority to enter into an agreement to do the housing production plan, and I'll send that email off this evening when we do that. But I believe we have the authority to enter into these sorts of agreements where
And we're using the funding from the Affordable Housing Trust anyways, correct? Right,
Yes.
so we'll be funding this directly.
yes,
So.
and we may have to there are several different buckets. It gets complicated because we make things complicated that should be simple, but the money that we had before we got the 500 and change at town meeting would probably be the bucket we would have to use. But that bucket is available.
Yeah, and I know when Doug, when you came to CPC, we had that conversation of if we wanted to include this type of planning work in what the CPC funds could fund. And since it was pretty late in the game, we decided not to add that in. So like you said, Al, whatever money is in there from non-CPA sources is what we would need to use to.
Another money
to
is
pay
there from
this.
CPA sources as well, but it's unrestricted.
Okay.
Or rather it is less restricted, it's still CPA restricted.
That makes sense.
So Ellen, have you had experience with either of these groups, just in your own work experience, or do you know of either of these groups?
So I don't know anyone there personally. I know that they are respected groups, that these are folks people use frequently for this type of planning, for other types of municipal rezoning, community planning efforts. So I think credential wise, they're both solid.
Great. No, that's actually really
You
helpful.
had indicated that Barrett had done this before. I mean, the prices are, for all intents and purposes, the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they've both done some housing production plans. I would say that Barrett probably has done more, or at least included more in the materials they sent over. Community scale did include the Lancaster housing production plan, and then another example from Greenfield that wasn't called a production plan, but was a housing plan. They must have had their own reasons for what that was titled, but followed almost the identical format of the Lancaster housing production plan.
And I'm
And Barrett
looking at,
included
yeah, go ahead, sorry, go, keep on, sorry.
I was just gonna say they included the Arlington housing plan, Barrett did. So we do have kind of some similar work samples to look at.
Okay, so the community, now what is our deadline for submitting the plan?
End of July.
End of July, okay. All right, so I'm just going through both of them, and so community scale looks like they would certainly do that. You just,
Yeah, they both said they would do it. I noticed Barrett called it a daunting task to finish it that quickly.
Yeah, which to be fair, I
Which-
mean, it is, we're coming at this late. So I think it was
Yeah,
good that they
if
acknowledged
it's
that.
$45,000, it's not that daunting.
Yeah, I think Barrett has a 4-month schedule, but with April being part of the schedule, right? Which obviously we're already at the end of April, right? By the way, Sam Stivers has his hand raised. Are you guys okay if I let him speak?
Certainly.
He might have a clarification. Sam, I'm gonna let you talk. Hopefully you're unmuted.
Yep, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
I'd suggest you might touch base with the planning board, Mimi Luttrell. Judy Barrett was part of another firm that worked closely with us years ago for the zoning advisory committee, very, very detailed over several years, actually. And then I think planning board engaged her for a brief project more recently. And I don't know what happened to that, but planning board has certainly had experience with her, and I would, she certainly has credibility. She's done a lot of work in this general space. So we do have some experience with her. I don't know about the other group, but planning board might be a good resource for her, particularly if you're looking for reference there. That's it for me.
That's great. Thank you, Sam.
Well, while we have Sam on the line, we might as well solicit him as to whether he thinks the select board needs to approve this.
It's not my understanding that we do, but it wouldn't hurt to touch base with Kathy and Jay Tallerman just to be sure.
Yeah. All right, will do.
Thanks, Sam. I mean, I definitely think we should do this pretty quickly. Ellen, maybe you want to follow up with Jesse just to get, I know he couldn't be on the call today, but maybe follow up with him directly to get his thoughts on this. We can obviously schedule another quick meeting just to discuss this and, vote on this, as early as next week, type of thing. I do like that Barrett has done the Arlington production plan and the Sturbridge production plan. I think those, definitely Sturbridge seems more relevant to us than maybe the other two examples that were given by the other consultant. And it is helpful to know that, the town already has experience with Barrett, particularly if they're all pretty, if they're close in price, right? So price is not really the driving factor. Those things kind of jump out at me at quick, view, but I'm also open to, other discussion too as well.
And one thing that jumped out at me, it might seem like a small thing, but on the cover page, Barrett has photos of some other town, apparently, with a Wendy's diner that I don't recognize and a gazebo that I don't recognize. Whereas the other guys had photos from Southborough. So, it's that kind of attention to detail that can make a difference in these things.
Well, let me make a suggestion. That's just an idea. We could move to approve one or the other, subject to Ellen reviewing it with Jesse, particularly if it's Barrett, to make sure that that makes sense, and my reviewing it with Kathy and town council. And if we get positive feedback, then we can proceed, and if not, we can go back to the drawing board. That would maybe move things along. Does that make sense? Or do you want to wait?
If you say approve one or the, I mean, wouldn't we have to approve Barrett pending?
Yeah, I think
Discussions.
that would be, yeah, to approve Barrett pending Ellen's review with Jesse and my review with Kathy and town council. But if you guys want to wait, that's fine by me too.
Yeah, I'm just looking at yeah, it's hard to. I'm looking at the schedule again too. It does look like community scale seems to be, not starting to the 25th, right? So they seem like they're meeting the schedule. Just for background, right? Just saying this out loud.
Yeah,
I think
you're right. You're right.
Barrett is a bit more, I mean, it's hard to say, but they just have 4 months with April fully. Like April is pretty busy, right? Review existing plans, draft needs assessment. They're using April as if they have a full month.
Right.
And so, and then if they also already say it's a huge lift, right? That also makes me a little nervous of timing. But I think we went back to timing. I mean, again, I think we did, obviously we gotta get this done by July, but if it's not done by July, did we confirm that our safe harbor status is not at risk? We just need to get this done as soon as possible, correct?
Yes, that's what HLC said.
Okay. So, I definitely want to move this along, but it would be great to get Jesse's input too as well.
Yeah, I think I'd be
Yeah.
more in favor of another meeting where Jesse
Okay.
can be there and weigh in. Because, now I'm looking at the, what is the name of this company? Community Scale also included a little chart with, recent trends in Southborough, so it indicates they've looked into the town to some extent. They had
Okay,
some projected growth. I mean,
I'll try and get us an answer on those two questions, and maybe we can meet. Let's see, my next Thursday is not good for me. If we could meet during the week, during the day for half an hour, that might be better. Tuesday night is also not good for me.
Yeah, I think the best for me probably would be definitely like a morning for like 30 minutes, right? To just
Okay.
focus on this topic.
Yeah.
I mean, to be realistic, probably Thursday morning is the best, more just for logistics of getting Jesse's confirmation and getting the agenda out in time. But I could do this Thursday morning. I could probably also do this Tuesday morning. I don't think we're gonna have enough time to get the agenda out. So I don't know, does Thursday morning, May 1st work for folks?
That works for me.
yep, it's okay with me.
Any specific time that you guys like? 8:30, 9? I mean, I'm pretty open, so I don't have a preference.
9 o'clock?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so I think the idea is that we will look to, I mean, I think I'll just go in that direction. And then Alan, if you could follow up with Jesse directly on his thoughts. I'll email Jesse about 9 a.m. too as well for the next meeting and we'll just have this be the only agenda item so we can just focus on this and, get through it. And then, I might suggest too, if anyone has any kind of questions on either of those, maybe we give those to Ellen and Jesse. So if there needs to be any follow-up with the consultants before next Thursday, I think that might make sense too as well, if there needs to be any kind of clarification.
And would you also be comfortable with me reaching out to the two just to let them know where we are in our timeline?
Yeah.
So they're not waiting for something tomorrow.
Yep, definitely. To let them know that we are working through this. I think that's great. So
Great.
And I do think one of the things I think, Ellen, that jumps out off the page, obviously, is when you follow up with Barrett, maybe to try to confirm their schedule. If we release them, say, on the 1st of May, right? Or, the following week on the, whatever that following day is. But, you know, what would their schedule be, and maybe ask both to confirm their schedules if we release them, you know, if we finalize it next week and they start the Monday the following week, what would their schedule be? I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
Okay.
you want to actually make sure that the people who are going to work on it are actually available, stuff like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Little details.
Yep.
That's good.
All right.
And then one other piece to share is that we've also been in touch with MAPC with our regional planning body to see what their availability is to support this. Kind of not knowing what we would get in proposal wise. So their timing was a little delayed. They are available to support the work, but weren't available for an initial discussion until the week of the 3rd. So, which is a Saturday, so I don't know why they said that. So the week of the 5th, I'm presuming. So just to know that if for whatever reason these two don't work out or the timing doesn't work out with them, we have that potential option as well.
All right, excellent.
Okay. All right, great. So the next two items are more general discussion topics. I don't know, maybe we want to go to maybe first to 66 Breakneck Hill Road parcel, and we can kind of come back to the more general discussions, but you know, does that make sense to the committee?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, great.
So obviously, if we were to just get serious about this, we would probably have to do this in executive session, but there is a bill. See, are you familiar with 66 Breakneck Hill? It's a cinder block building. It's about 10,000, a little over 10,000 square feet. It's currently, it sits on a little like 1.1 acres of land abutting the Breakneck Hill Reserve. It's available, listed for $850,000. It's been on the market a while. That building could conceivably be converted into 4 or 5, maybe 6 units. Now, you know, many a slip twixt the cup in the lip here, but if I think it's worth at least contacting the realtor and saying we would have some interest in at least looking at the building, and I can probably convince somebody from Habitat to go through it and at least give us their opinion as to whether, you know, something could be done with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth looking at for sure. And this is what I was referring to when, you know, I think CPC might, open space might be interested in this kind of parcel because, well, there's open space right next door.
Yes.
Yeah, I think at least, like you said, taking the initial steps to look at it are worth pursuing. There's never much out there that's available in town, so anything that is, I feel like is worth an initial look.
All right.
Yep,
Does anybody want to come with me?
I'll
Might
go.
be able to come.
Okay. All right, I will get in touch with the realtor and at least see if we can't walk through the building, and I may ask if it's, I don't want to talk too much about price and deal, but and then we can come back and we can give a report on what we saw and whether it's possible we could do something with it. But, you know, I think realistically with the sum of money we have, somewhere between 4 and 5 affordable units is really about as good as we're going to do. In fact, that's probably better than we have any right to expect to do. So, all right, Ellen, I'll get in touch with you and we can see if we can tour the building. All
Thank
right.
you. And it sounded like Paul, you might be interested too. So feel free to reach out to both of us if you are,
well-
and we'll do it so it's not a quorum, but we can see who's available.
Yeah, I don't think we can both go, but
Yeah.
let's, yeah. I guess makes sense. Reach out to both and, I mean, I'll bow out if it comes to that, so.
We can have one or the other of you can be available. It's gonna rain on Saturday, so I'm probably not gonna do any planting, so Saturday would be a good time for me. All right, I'll reach out to the Realtor and see what we can do.
Okay, sounds
For all I
great.
know, it's already sold, but I think it's been on the market for a while. And it would, it's gonna require, if we were to do a multifamily unit, it's either we'd have to do it as a 40B or we would need a special permit of some form.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's great you guys should tour it and, obviously any available piece of land that is, in a price range that at least we can have striking distance to makes a lot of sense. So at least to evaluate it. I think that's great.
All right.
All right, then jumping back, this was just a general open mic item on discussion of potential strategies for affordable housing. So I will open it up to the committee if folks have any specific things they want to talk about before we jump into executive session and defer to the members.
So one item I wanted to raise is that Colleen shared with a number of folks in town that Southborough is now officially compliant with MBTA communities. So the state gave the final sign off, which opens us up to be able to apply for additional grant funds, including the Community Catalyst Fund, which is specifically for MBTA communities compliant communities. So they folded that into the one-stop application. So, that's not to jump ahead, but so if we wanted to think about the potential to work on something within the 3A districts, realistically, there's kind of one district and one area that is potentially developable. But there are these Community Catalyst Fund grants are $250,000 to $1 million from the state. And so if this was something we would want to pursue, I think potentially talking to Leah Emerson, kind of figuring out the pieces that would need to be in place, it would definitely require additional partnership with a nonprofit developer or a for-profit community-minded developer. But just, Andrew Pfaff reached out to me yesterday to kind of flag that Colleen had shared this and to be thinking about, this as another potential funding source.
That would be great. It'd be interesting to see, I'm trying to, I think I remember all the districts, right? But obviously if any land becomes available and we could be competitive and then be able to apply for some funds that would even leverage further, that would be great. So definitely we should be keeping an eye out for those parcels, that might be of size, right? So I definitely agree with that. That's great to know. I didn't know about I obviously know about the MBTA Communities Act, but not the catalyst funds that would be available now that we're compliant, which is great.
Now, is this going to be part of the, I think it's June 4th submission deadline?
So for this, it goes later in June, kind of given when they rolled this out, but from kind of my brief reading of the application requirements, you kind of need a project in place, or at least the bones of a project. And so I don't know for this round that would be at all feasible. But I think kind of at least gauging interest in pursuing something, in our 3A districts and starting to form some of those connections. Because I think as well, kind of even outside of 3A, we've had some conversations about how we can leverage the Affordable Housing Trust funds. And as you said, Al, kind of, our money only goes so far. So how can we use that to bring in other partners with more experience in actually building and developing, to get more things built.
I know we had this on Shopsy, just kind of going along the lines of getting state funding. I think at one point Shopsy had some administrative assistance, right? We had a consultant, you know, for it was through a grant. And, you know, obviously, you know, Shopsy, you know, was helpful during the Shopsy meetings, but we didn't have any funds to do anything with, right? You know, but again, I say this out loud more just because of the one-stop application. If, you know, be curious, you know, if the Affordable Housing Trust would be able to, you know, apply for something that would allow us to have a part-time consultant or us, you know, help support us as we go through this, because obviously we're just scratching the surface, right? And there's a lot of topics we want to discuss. And, you know, we obviously, the first list is get through the housing production plan, but as I say that, I don't know, and maybe Jesse will remember, I don't know how, you know, how that was applied for previously. Was there actually town assistance to help us actually do that staff wise to actually apply through the one stop? Was it really done by Dorianne and the team? I just don't know, but that might be something of interest for us too, because it gives us a little bit more bandwidth to have someone really, you know, chase some of these things down and at least get ourselves more organized as we try to, you know, go about this. But just, I'm throwing that out there. That might be something that we do want to, maybe someone to ask Ellen, maybe you can ask Jesse when you talk to him too, because I think that would be a really good use of time for us to, you know, if we can apply for some staffing assistance, because, you know, we are compliant with the MBTA Communities Act. We just did this, you know, transfer of funds, you know, right, to the affordable. Like, there's a good track record showing that we're really in earnest trying to figure something out and trying to do something. And then also the ADUs also got passed, right? So maybe there's, you know, we're not looking for a big amount. Maybe the state will be generous enough to allow us to get, you know, 25 or 30. That will get us somebody to attend these meetings with us and be able to do some legwork for us in between meetings.
The one thing we might want to consider is inviting Mark Davis to come and talk with us. Mark gave a presentation to the select board about 6-8 months ago on, I'm trying to remember the exact description, but it was a special zoning overlay district that that was related to the MBTA, and
It was, sorry.
Yeah, no,
The-
do you remember what it was?
It was a 40R,
That's-
like
yeah.
smart growth overlay that he was proposing, for the MBTA parking lot, basically.
Yeah, and I think, does that make sense to you, Ellen, to have him come and chat with us about his 40A ideas?
Yeah, yes, I'm just thinking about how these things fit together. But I think all of these ideas are worth exploring. So I think that's a good person. And because he had, you know, personal experience working, it was the Riverside Station in Newton that kind of
Yeah.
converted their Green Line parking lot to affordable housing, well, housing,
Yeah,
including an affordable components, and then included a parking garage to replace the lost parking.
Yeah,
And so it would be a separate consideration from the 3A, and we wouldn't get a community catalyst support for that since it's not our 3A district. But that's not to say we couldn't get support from another stream of funding or another kind of interested
Yeah.
partner in
I
that work.
do seem to recall that the big issue was, you know, where does the poop go?
Yeah, that's always the issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right,
Who-
I
who
can
is this
certainly reach
guy?
out to Mark and see if he's available to, you know, I think we ought to have a discussion about, you know, all of the options that are available to us.
And who is Mark Davis?
Mark Davis he's an engineer. He's worked for the state doing transportation development projects. And he's very knowledgeable on this sort of stuff. He's currently serving on the Neary Building Committee.
Was he the guy who spoke up at town meeting when we were debating the MBTA law? And he talked about using the parking lot as a
Yeah,
development
that was
site.
probably Mark, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was a very intriguing idea.
All right, I can reach out to Mark and see if he'd be available and we can try and set that up.
Other topics on just, generally strategies that we want to talk about today?
I think I said before about having somebody talk about bonding and
Yep.
what that can do for us.
Al, is there
Yeah,
somebody
and-
in town that could, sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Say,
So-
Al, is there somebody in
I-
town that could speak to us on that?
I can certainly tell you what we have done with other CPA sourced funds, which is, so if we bond something, we have to have a stream of income to pay for the bond. And, the stream of income right now would be on the order of $50,000 a year, so I'd have to go and work through, but I think that would mean we might be able to borrow $500,000. And right now, the only dedicated stream of income that exists is the CPA community housing funds. And so, we've done that with open space with Chestnut Hill. The obligation is a general obligation of the town of Southborough, so that if something happened to the CPA, the town of Southborough would be on the hook for the funds, for better and worse. But that's pretty much how it would work. We could, you're borrowing against a future stream of income. I can have
Okay.
Brian join us at some point. He's the treasurer and it's his bailiwick.
Yep.
And
So, I
Oh,
mean,
sorry.
if the town is on the hook, as you say, then I would say that 50K or so is one source, but I mean, if the town decided this was a priority, they could dedicate some amount of money to an
Yes.
affordable housing project, right?
Yes, they could certainly dedicate, and in fact, if they vote to borrow the money, they are dedicating a certain amount of money one way or the other. But yes, if we could, let's see, so, if you were to borrow money for 15 years, I happened to have done this calculation the other day at 4.5%, and you borrow $10 million, it will cost us about $800,000 a year. So you can sort of, if you wanted to borrow $1 million, it'd cost $80,000 a year for 15 years.
And Al, do you know how much, or Alan, do you guys know how much typically of CPA funds per year is allocated to affordable housing? Like, is it 30,000 a year, 40, 50? I just don't know. I know we've transferred all of the funds that were available, but the 100, but do you know how much actually goes into the bucket each year? It might just be a good way to understand how much we have, what revenue stream we have.
I think it's about $50,000 a year.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's always some variation, but it's usually around that.
Okay.
And what about, is it the biggest bucket is just not dedicated, right?
Right.
I
Yep.
remember. So, and I wonder, do they tend to spend that down every year?
A
Or-
lot of
No.
it goes to rec.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not spent down every year, but it is spent.
I guess what I'm getting at is, if we did decide we wanted to do a sizable project, I don't know, 20 units, say, for the sake of argument. And we, I think if we thought about different funding sources and a partnership with a developer, I guess I'd like to see what that looks like and what would the town have to commit versus what the developer commits and, whatever else. So, what would it take to make something like that happen, I guess is the question. And if affordable housing is a priority in the town, maybe the town is, has the appetite to do something like that. But,
And
I
Paul,
don't think we've ever presented that as
Yeah.
an option before.
No, Paul, you might remember, I think you were on Shops. You remember I think it was Metro West Collaborative. We had a nonprofit group come in. And Alan, more for your benefit. They've done quite a few projects in other towns where the town has donated the land. And it was a pretty nominal amount per unit after that. It was like between 20 and 40,000 per unit for kind of the gap, right? That they needed. And then they would go get other, state sources, tax credits, etc. It's been a while. I'm trying to make sure I don't misremember that number, right? So I do think it's good to figure out, because again, if there's a parcel of land that say is 700 or 800, which we don't want to necessarily put all capital into, maybe a bonding does work for that, to get the land or something. And then, but it's if we do use a third party developer or nonprofit affordable housing developer, it may be a lower lift than most people are expecting, from a town perspective. But
Yeah. I mean, other towns are doing it, like Hudson did it. Hudson has a beautiful, they repurposed an old building, but they're not wholly different from us, I don't think.
Yeah. And some of them are also not necessarily 100% affordable either. Sometimes it's a mixed income housing too as well, which actually allows things to go farther. And also something for us just to keep in mind as a committee, just with town, community members and, people's thoughts on, how to approach some of this stuff. But but I just throw that out there too as well, because I do think, I agree with Paul, it'd be great to get more discussion upon the bonding to understand what kind of tools we have, at least on our side. And then besides Habitat for Humanity, which I think we want to try to schedule for next time, maybe we actually do get another, affordable housing group in that can also explain, how they've approached it type of thing. So we kind of get, educate ourselves as we go through this. And Alan, you might be very familiar with this process, obviously, but definitely helpful.
Yeah. So then there's one other parcel which the town owns, which is Paul is it's why am I drawing a blank?
Oh, on Pinecone or
Pinecone.
Maple Crest?
Yeah. Is that in your neighborhood, Paul?
Yeah.
I visited with the health department and looked at the sneaking up on 50-year-old perk records. And there's a portion of that lot that was not tested. And we could probably get it tested for short money. We'd have to get the permission of the select board, which controls that lot. I think one of the suggestions was that maybe we'd want to sort of talk to the neighbors first.
Okay. I could do that.
Well, yeah, if you wanted to, yeah, make you Mr. Popular.
That'll make me real popular. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
actually, I'm good friends with somebody who's like kitty corner across the street, so
Okay.
I could start with him.
Yeah, and the lot is kind of a mess. It's just nasty and overgrown. And we could conceivably get a single family home in there, or maybe a duplex that's pending a perk. It has some challenges. There's a drain on the southeast corner, a storm drain that drains into the reservoir. And we can't put a septic system within 100 feet of that drain, which is, I think, what killed it the last time.
Yeah.
So, but I think if we talk to, find out how much resistance we're going to have and see whether that's something we want to do.
Okay.
One of them is I did want to bring, we talked about this before, potentially recommendation through the planning board, but lifting the cap on the amount of senior housing units, right? I think senior housing is capped. We've talked about this before. I'm not sure why it's capped, especially for all of us that are getting older and may want to stay in town and, more of a duplex or a townhome or something smaller. Maybe that's something we also put into the housing production plan too, because the housing production plan is a good opportunity for us to have a whole series of recommendations that could become action items for us for, say next spring town meeting or something like that. But I know that's something that's, we've talked at Shopsy and has been carried on for quite a bit, but that seems like a, you know, hopefully would be a pretty easy lift. And, you know, again, I think there were some reservations about crossing over the planning board, but I do think it's in our purview to recommend stuff to other groups, right? You know, to potentially sponsor warrant articles, but I think that one would be a good use. I see no reason why we would not do that, right? There's no real impact to schools, you know, low traffic, and creates opportunities for us to free up single family homes for families, right? Which is the biggest housing crisis we have right now. So, but I think that's just something I think we should get into the housing production plan just generally as a concept, but we should keep that on our minds as well.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay. Any other topics? If not, we can head to executive session.
One other thing to mention, is just as we talked a bit about consultant support, which I'll talk to Jesse about that process last time, and some of these other questions around bonding and kind of how to put together a bigger project, is the potential to apply for technical assistance from a place like MAPC or Massachusetts Housing Partnership, where full disclosure I work, or from CHAPA, where kind of some of their community assistance or municipal engagement folks work specifically with trusts and with other town committees to kind of be able to answer some of those questions. So kind of one thing for us to consider if we would want to engage somebody to help us with some of that.
Great. Okay. So do I have a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Okay,
Second,
right. All right, all in favor? Al?
Aye.
Ellen? Paul?
aye.
And Doug is aye. Okay, let me do this.
Doug, I think you need to read the statement.
Okay, I
Oh,
will
yeah.
read the statement. Okay. So the board will be entered into executive session per MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21, and not returning to open session to discuss potential property acquisition exemption number 6. As the chair has determined that open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's position. So Al, thank you for the motion, and Paul second, and we have voted in favor individually. And so let me do this. I'm going to stop the recording.